Dumelang ka lapeng. Welcome to Come Alive with Mpho Mokgotsi, the show that inspires you to live your best life. I am Mpho Mokgotsi. I'm a life coach and award-winning author. Today's episode, we are discussing depression and the effect it has on a human being. With me in studio, I have my gorgeous sister queen, Faith. Faith, welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Faith Siboyi. I am a beauty therapist, a mom of two, a wife, and a businesswoman.
That's incredible. I love the fact that you wear so many hats. That's great. So, tell us a little bit about depression. How did you discover that you were depressed? What gave away the fact that, you know what, I'm actually depressed?
So it didn't come out as I am depressed per se. When I was diagnosed, it was never depression as such. But I found myself in hospital a lot. It was either eating disorder, vomiting, and just not feeling like being around people. I was just constantly sick. And then when I went to the hospitals, they could not diagnose. And ultimately, I went to a psychiatrist to find out what is wrong with me, and it was more of you have anxiety attacks, and it only became a depression diagnosis once we discovered what is causing me anxiety attacks. Why am I constantly anxious and non-functional?
Wow. So could you say maybe you went to a doctor who then diagnosed you, or were you in a position where you can actually say, actually I'm pinning down now to depression?
Okay, so I'm a bubbly person, I'm a lively person to start off with. But when I started getting all sick, I started disconnecting myself from people. I was so self-isolated. I didn't love the things that I used to love anymore. I love hosting. I could not host anymore. I was easily irritated, stuff like that. So when I went to a psychiatrist, it was more of what's wrong with me, but also can you give me medication that will help me to cope with whatever is going on with me. And when we started to observe what is it that is happening on my day-to-day basis, that's when I was diagnosed with depression. And I'm very heavily depressed.
And the effects of that diagnosis, how did it actually affect not only you, because I know that you're a married woman, you've got kids, so how did it actually change the dynamics of the family?
It affected me a lot. For starters, my daughter, I still had one daughter at the time who was in preschool. She was still very much young. And I had no time for her because I was constantly in bed. Once they've introduced me to antidepressants, I was sleeping a lot. So I could not function as a mom. I had no energy to spare for my daughter. And now that meant my husband had to still attend to his full-time job. He had to take care of me. He had to take care of the daughter, which became such a strain for everyone in the household.
I can just imagine, because I mean, it sounds like you only had your husband to actually give you support, immediate support. Would you say that, you know, it was a coping mechanism for you having just your husband, or did you feel like maybe you needed more support around you at the time?
I needed more support, but at the same time, remember, I was becoming antisocial. So that made it difficult to reach out to people or to say, who can I let into the space? And once I got to understand what depression was and what was happening with me, I became even more protective of my space as to who do I let into that space, because I was much more vulnerable and I was finding myself, why am I going through depression? What is the real source of that? And with that, I could not risk just letting everyone into the space. So yes, my husband was the safe space. I had to lean on my husband, but at the same time, I had my sister who lives around Pretoria, who at least was in close proximity to be able to every now and then maybe cook for my family, so that when my husband comes back from work, he can pass by their house and get food, you know.
Absolutely. So in terms of, you know, society, I know we have so many cases of depression, clinical, you know, depression. What advice would you give to somebody who's going through the process right now?
You know, the challenge is people are afraid to talk about what they are going through. And it's when you start talking about it that you realize that you're not the only one. I was very suicidal, and being alone and feeding on that negativity was making me even more at risk of committing suicide. So talking to other people that go through the same thing is far much more helpful. So I would advise people to don't hold it to yourself. I know people think that there is a stigma around it, but you know what? It is your life. You have one life to live. If you want to save yourself, you have to do what you have to do that will make you and keep you alive. So for me, that's that. And know when to seek help. I think for me, coming from a Christian background, really, I was not encouraged to seek the medical route as help. I was always told, you have to pray. Yes, I support prayer and I do pray. But at the stage that I was in, prayer was not an option because I didn't even know how to pray. I just didn't understand what I was going through. So for me, finding help in a psychiatrist saved my life and helped me to get to that position where I could actually seek help in prayer. So seek help, talk to the right people, and just strive to stay alive.
You touched on a point that I think is very crucial for us, especially as Black people. We tend to not actually acknowledge the fact that we are depressed. If you go to your mom, for example, and you're like, Mom, this is how I'm feeling, hardly ever would they actually jump to the conclusion that, you know what, you are actually depressed, my child, let me take you to a doctor or let's seek help. It's normally like, just brush it off, you'll get okay at some point. So what are the advice that we can do as a society to actually build and help and support the people that are going through this very difficult thing called depression?
You know, it's such a shame that we stigmatize these issues that are important because it is stigmatized, people don't know what depression is. They don't know how to spot it, and that makes it difficult to know how to help a person. You can't help a person if you can't even identify the problem. You can't know that this person needs help if you don't understand that this is a problem. So I think if we can open ourselves to educating ourselves more about mental health issues, that would be a good starting point, and it will help us to have these uncomfortable conversations with those that we love and help them to seek help. Another thing that I think is also important when you seek the help, it is important that you walk the journey with them. For me, the difficult part was because my husband works and all that, when I would go to a psychiatrist, there are times where I felt I needed him there with me so that he can also understand that, okay, this is how he can best handle it and be a best support for me. So when you say you're supporting a person, it's not necessarily just getting them the doctor. Go with them to the doctor so that you understand that, okay, when they are going through this is how I can best handle it to help them not to find themselves soaked up in what they are going through.
This is incredible information that you're giving us. So for someone who says, look, I'm looking for information just so I can find out, do you say maybe Google can give them that information, or where would you point them in the right direction?
Google does have information, but for me also, people like us are available to talk about it. You can find that on social medias and whatever. One thing that I would say or advise people to avoid is to self-diagnose. Google will help you to identify symptoms that can guide you in the right direction as to which help do I need. Do I need to see a dietitian? Do I need to see a physio or a psychologist? But you can never diagnose yourself through Google. So Google as a tool to just guide you on what is going on with you, it's okay, but you still need to go to the professionals.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us and educating us more about depression. And right now in studio with me, I have a young lady who's also going to be sharing her experience in terms of what depression has done in her life. Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Kokezo. I'm 28 years old and I'm from Pretoria, and I work as an international spa therapist.
Lovely. Kokezo, when did you discover the effects that, now I can say I'm actually depressed? When did you discover that you actually had this depression?
Well, at first, I didn't know I was depressed. So all I knew is that I was sad all the time. But because I was a bubbly person, so I was very good at hiding it. So I was always cracking jokes, making sure that I'm hiding it, but I didn't know that I was burying myself into a deep hole that I don't know if I will ever come out of it. So as time went on, because the root of my depression was my grandfather dying, because we were very close. So at that time, like, everybody just moved on, and I was the only one who was left behind. And then things, I guess, it got worse when I went to varsity. And on the contrary, I was actually enrolled for psychology. So you can just imagine. So while I was deep in the course, that's when I realized, oh my God, I am depressed. But I'm in school, so it's not legitimate that I am really depressed, because I am telling this to myself. So I was like, okay, so all these signs that I've been getting, anger, always crying for no reason, laughing, and then in the middle of laughing and then I'm crying, that is depression. So because now I'm at varsity, I'm alone, there are no parents to check what I'm doing, then that's when I started drinking. Drinking was my coping mechanism. So I couldn't stay sober, to a point where it really affected my schoolwork, because I would literally go to school Tuesday and Wednesday. That was it, because Thursday to Monday it was party all the time.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then I started lagging behind in schoolwork, to a point where when I was supposed to go into my final year, that was when I decided, you know what, I'm done with this, because I am supposed to be studying something that is going to help people, but it's actually making me worse. And there were times where I was even suicidal, because I tried to kill myself a couple of times. And like, it's some of the things that are hardly talked about, but like I said, I was very good at hiding it. So the people around me, because I'm always drinking, happy, laughing, so they thought,
they couldn't even tell that you were going through this really difficult time. So it sounds like yours was actually kicked off by grief. So you never allowed yourself to grieve to that point where now it turned into depression. Okay, so how important is allowing the grieving period to actually unfold as it is? Right now, I'm sure you're in a position where you can actually tell us, because you've gone through it. Yeah.
All I can say is we all experience grief differently. So just try to accept it. It's not easy, but make peace with it. Yeah, I always even tell my mom, if maybe she's going through something, I'm like, make peace with it. Let it out of your heart. If you feel like you want to cry, cry. Because if you don't cry, you're keeping it inside, you're keeping it inside your head, and it's going to go on and on and on and on. So
that's it. Yeah. I mean, we've just gone through COVID, right? And we know the amount of people that a lot of us have actually lost. And a lot of us are still in the grieving period, right? And obviously understanding that grief can actually lead to depression. What message would you actually share with someone who says, I think I'm actually there, but I'm not 100% sure? What direction of advice would you actually give them?
Okay, one thing I noticed from myself is that talking about it is not easy. Even if someone just walks up to you and say, talk about it, talk to someone, it's not easy, because you don't know if the person you're going to talk to is going to judge you, is going to accept you, is going to help you. So you hold back. So what I can say is, from my personal experience, find a hobby, find something that can distract you. If it means you trying to read a new book, fine, go ahead, read a new book. Find a game to play, just distract yourself.
Oh, that's amazing. You touched on as well earlier that, you know, you were a student at that point, and many of our students are also committing suicide. I mean, how often do we read in newspapers that this scholar has now committed suicide? So in terms of that being, you know, the crux of the matter, suicide, because even the earlier, you know, guest spoke about how she was so suicidal. What has kept you now from not being suicidal? I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. The thing is, when I feel sad, like I said, find a hobby. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always find something to do. Right now, I have so many certificates. So every time I feel like something is wrong in my head, I enroll myself into something.
Wow. So you're keeping yourself busy doing something that is actually going to help you also in life.
Yeah, I have, like I said, I have so many certificates. They would literally make a paper wall. So I just enroll myself into something. I just study. And then when I'm done with it, if I find something else interesting, I go for it. I always go for something that's interesting.
Okay. In terms of your journey specifically, did you have to be on medication? And if so, how long do you actually stay on these medications?
No, actually, I never went into medication.
Okay.
However, because I did know what the root of my problem was, I did my own method. So basically what I did is I locked myself in the house because I wanted to tackle the first thing was alcoholism, because it wasn't easy for me to talk to my family about it because they were not really that open-minded. So I was like, you know what, I am going to kill this elephant myself because I know what's going on with myself. So I locked myself in the house, and the first thing that I did was rehab myself, strip myself of alcohol. There was alcohol in the house, but it took every single drop of blood inside of me not to drink. I think I stayed sober for that year with the alcohol in the house for 1 year. No alcohol,
that's
nothing.
Incredible.
I would literally crave it because remember, I'm going through these things and then there's anger coming out, which I didn't even know where it's coming from. There's anger coming out, my skin is crawling, and I feel like breaking the wall. So I was like, as long as I can just go through this 1 year without alcohol, everything will be okay. So after I stopped the alcohol, that's when my mind came more clear, and then I started accepting what happened, and then life moved on from there. So even though it does creep in there and there, but I know how to tackle it.
In terms of your mom and your support system, you know, a lot of times you're speaking about how you were so immersed in yourself. Do you feel like, you know, you needed that extra support also for you to overcome this?
Yes, I did need support because mostly, you know, you need support from family, because you can have friends, but as soon as you have problems, if they are not true friends, they are going to run away from you. I didn't have friends at that time. So I did need that support from my family, but I didn't get it because they didn't get what is going on with me, and I couldn't also talk to them what is going on with me. So it was a lonely journey, I guess.
Okay, so thank you so much for coming through and sharing this very insightful information with us. I think especially with the younger generation, it's something that my generation, perhaps maybe it wasn't so prominent, but I'm seeing it a lot more with the younger kids. And what you've shared has actually opened our eyes. I'm a lot in, you know, much better understanding of what depression is and what it does for a young girl like yourself. Thank you for coming through. Right now, I've got a clinical psychologist who's also going to be talking to us in terms of what depression is all about. Let's educate ourselves, right? Nozi, welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Nozi. I am a clinical psychologist. So I provide clinical psychology services, such as psychotherapy, assessments. I work with individuals, I work with couples, and I work with groups. But for the most part, I work with adults as well as adolescents.
That is incredible. So from your point of view as a clinical psychologist, can you just strip away this depression? Can you diagnose it for us? What exactly does it mean?
Okay. So how I look at it is depression is it's a disease of the mind. Okay, and this is an invisible disease. So for most people, it's not easy to pick it up. You know, people don't see that you're struggling because you don't have a scar to show, you don't have a wound, and it is something that is very isolating, because people that are struggling with depression tend to just withdraw socially. So people are not seeing that they're really struggling. But also one of the most, the things that happen with depression is that it manifests in thoughts,
Yeah.
it manifests in feelings as well as behaviors. So you will notice certain behaviors. There's changes in behaviors, and then that's when people can recognize that, okay, maybe there is something that is going on.
Nozi, we had two amazing human beings. I mean, these ladies are incredible in their fields. They're doing such amazing stuff, and yet they're struggling with depression, right? And we heard their story. They shared with us the journey that they had to travel in terms of this depression. But half the time, we don't speak about the people that needs to give us the support. So if a husband or a mother or somebody who says, my friend is going through that, how would you advise them to actually be a support system for these people that are going through this really difficult time?
Yeah. I must say the ladies are very brave because it's often very difficult for people to open up about this. So to answer your question, I think that if you are a family member, a friend of somebody that is struggling with depression, it's really important for you to be there for them, for you to be supportive. Ask questions. Don't assume things. You know, oftentimes you'll hear people trying to be supportive, but then end up saying things like, you know, you can get this, you know, what we call this positive. It's actually toxic positivity, you know, mind over matter, all those things. And you find that sometimes there's people that don't even understand mental illnesses and they don't believe in mental illnesses. You know, you've heard things from our communities, people saying black people don't go to therapy, they go to church. So it's important that if you are there, be a supportive, you know, ask questions, ask what it's like for them. You know, what is it like for you to be struggling with this? Because that helps you to gain empathy. And basically empathy is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes so that you understand exactly what they're going through.
Awesome. From a clinical psychologist point of view, so say for example, I feel like I'm depressed and I'm coming to your practice. Walk me through the journey. What exactly would you be doing in consultation? What does that entail? So that I'm much more informed when I have to make this decision.
So I think for me, the most important thing is to know you, to understand your narrative. You know, what is it that is happening? When did it start? And then, but also we must understand that, you know, depression occurs in a continuum. So you might be presenting with maybe mild depression, and well, that is going to inform the treatment.
Yeah.
And if you are presenting with, for an example, severe depression, that also, you know, informs the kind of treatment that is needed. For an example, then, you know, we have to look at a psychiatric intervention, because oftentimes when people are severely depressed, it's almost like we as psychologists don't have access to their psyche. So it's not easy for me to sit and perform talk therapy with you, because oftentimes you're not even present. You can't hear what I'm saying. You can't engage in therapy. And therapy requires that you engage in it for you to benefit out of it. Yeah.
That is so amazing. Thank you so much, Nozi, for informing us in terms of what you do for people that are actually going through this very difficult thing called depression.